If I was writing a cookbook, this recipe would definitely be in it. Part 5, Caponata. This classic recipe is a great way to use up end of the year fruits or vegetables from your garden, like eggplant, peppers, and tomatoes. And it's amazing how such a simple dish has so much flavor. Not to mention, it's a great way to eat lots of vegetables. This is one of those recipes that only gets better the longer it sits in your fridge. So when I'm baking this, I'm going to be making a double batch, but I'm going to give you the measurements for a single batch of caponata. I preheated my oven to 400 degrees and I took one large eggplant, I cubed it, and put it on a baking sheet lined with parchment paper. You could cook this on the stove top, but since I was making so much of it, I thought it would be easier if I just baked it in the oven. You're going to cook the eggplant in the oven until it's soft and tender. You would do the same thing if you were doing it on the stove top, adding some olive oil, salt, and pepper to taste. This dish has so many surprising textures and flavors. The eggplant makes up the bulk of the dish, and it really gives the creaminess to the caponata. I remember the first time I had this, I thought this couldn't be right. There's vinegars and honey and raisins and olives, and all of that sounded like way too much, but it is so good. And it's delicious. You could just have it over rice, you could have it on its own. It's really fantastic. I love this. Not to go off on a tangent here, but you see the bottoms of those eggplants? I heard that the more circular or oval that the bottom is helps you figure out if the eggplant is male or female, which then has to do with the amount of seeds in the eggplant, which then supposedly affects the bitterness of the eggplant. Do you have any insight about whether or not that's true? I didn't notice anything. It kind of stands to reason that the male or the female would have a different amount of seeds. That makes sense, but I didn't notice if it was more or less bitter. Anyway, gonna put that batch of eggplant in the oven. So I have two trays of eggplant going in the oven while I have one larger tray where I have some leftover eggplant, and I'm adding the peppers. These are just red peppers and yellow peppers, and they're like the sweet type of pepper, just giving them a rough dice, and they'll go on the baking sheet along with the onions. I started a garden, or more specifically, my dad made me start a garden about 10 years ago. And ever since I started growing food, I feel like I have greater insight into how dishes originated. Where I live in New York, in the Hudson Valley, all of these foods are ready at about the same time. I imagine that's probably true in most, if not all, places, because all of these foods are maturing at around the same time. All of these eggplants and peppers and onions are getting put on the baking sheets lined with parchment paper. And I really love parchment paper. I'm not one who uses a lot of tinfoil or plastic wrap. I try not to, but parchment paper is amazing. I love it. It's so helpful. Things don't stick. So I'm putting them on the trays and then adding some salt and pepper and olive oil and crushed red pepper. And then I'm spreading it out so it's not crowded. What you don't want to do is you don't want to have a big pile of eggplant or the peppers together, because what they'll do is they'll steam and their flavor, it won't be as nice because you won't get the caramelization. So just keep flipping it around until it's cooked and make sure that it's not piled on top of each other. So this is the never-ending shuffling dance of having multiple trays in the oven. Just keep an eye on them, and when those are cooking, then you're going to start getting ready the rest of your ingredients. In my case, I'm going to be using fresh tomatoes for this recipe, but you could use crushed tomatoes if that's all you had. But I have an excessive amount of fresh tomatoes coming out of the garden right now. So I used some cherry tomatoes. I probably should have just sliced those in half first so they would kind of burst and then the liquid would cook off a little bit. But I didn't. And I'm adding some confit garlic in there. So I'm just smashing it with the fork. So I'm going to let that cook until some of the extra juice from the tomatoes is cooked off. After the eggplant is done. I'm adding it to the pot and I'm cooking it once I put the eggplant in on medium low. Next, I'm going to add in some of the spices to cook with the olive oil and the vegetables. I have oregano and red wine vinegar, balsamic vinegar, and raisins, olives, and capers. I've made this without capers because I don't always have them on hand, but if you have them, it's a great chance to use them up. After that, I add the honey and the remaining vegetables that were cooking in the oven. In this case, it was a little bit of the eggplant and the peppers and the onions. Now, if I have one criticism of this dish, it's kind of the color. It's a little bit bland, if you will. So, what you can do after you finish cooking this, you can add parsley, which gives it a little bit of extra freshness and brightness from the texture of the herbs, but also it gives it a little bit of color. So, if that's something that you happen to have, I would suggest using it. I think it does make it look a little bit prettier too. And at the end, what you want to do is turn off the heat, let it sit for a little bit, maybe 10 minutes or so, and then start giving it a taste. You can adjust the salt, the pepper, the crushed red pepper. It's up to you how much you want to season it beyond what its base seasoning is. With every dish I make, I ask myself the same 6 questions. The first one is, how does it taste? And I love it. I think it's so delicious and it's such a unique flavor. 10 out of 10 for taste, in my opinion. Next up is, can you make it in bulk? And yes, you can. You saw me just make a double batch of it. You're really only limited to the space in your oven. The next question is, can you freeze it? I would say no. I think it would just get liquidy and weird. So that would be a no on the freezing. Next up, is it easy to make? Yeah, I think it's pretty easy. There's nothing really that complicated or complex about how to do it. And then I ask myself, is it quick? I don't think it's quick. It takes some time, and the longer it sits, the better it gets. So that would give it even more time. So I don't think this is a particularly quick dish. The last one I ask is, how much does it cost? And this is a little less straightforward. So I grew a lot of these vegetables like the eggplants, and I grew the tomatoes. I grew some of the peppers, but not all of them. So the bulk of things were free, you could say, from the garden. I think when I was adding up all the rest, it was about $4 to $5 for a double batch. So even if you had to buy all those things, I think this would still be a fairly inexpensive dish. Like maybe like $8 if you did a double batch, which is pretty good. This dish would be a great side or even a light dinner. And if you try it, I hope you enjoy it as much as I do.